Dubliners is a collection of 15 short stories by James Joyce, published in 1914. The stories revolve around the lives of various characters living in Dublin, Ireland, and are interconnected in their exploration of the themes of paralysis, entrapment, and the struggle for identity and self-realization. The Sisters, the opening story introduces the theme of paralysis through the perspective of a young boy who reflects on the recent death of a priest, Father Flynn, whom he admired. The boy grapples with the realization that the priest was not the morally upright figure he idolized. An encounter, two young boys, Mahoney and the narrator, play truant and embark on an adventure. They encounter a strange man who tells them lewd stories, and the narrator experiences a sense of unease and disillusionment. Araby, a young boy, becomes infatuated with his friend's sister, Mangan, and pledges to bring her a gift from the Araby Bazaar. The boy is ultimately disappointed by the commercialism of the bazaar and the realization that his feelings for Mangan are unrequited. Eveline Hill is torn between her desire for a new life with her lover, Frank, and her sense of obligation to her family. She chooses to stay in Dublin, ultimately paralyzed by her fear and indecision. After the race, the story revolves around a group of young men who participate in a car race through Dublin. The protagonist, Jimmy, is eager to prove himself to his wealthy and sophisticated friends, but he ultimately loses his entire inheritance in a reckless investment. Two gallants, two friends, Lenehan and Corley, navigate the seedy underbelly of Dublin. Lenehan waits for Corley to finish his rendezvous with a maidservant, and the two men ultimately exploit the woman for their own gain. The boarding house, a young man, Bob Duran, becomes entangled in a relationship with the boarding house owner's daughter, Polly, who is described as a fallen woman. The story explores the societal expectations and hypocrisy surrounding sexual relationships and the consequences of moral judgment. A Little Cloud, a poet, Little Chandler, reunites with an old friend, Ignatius Gallagher, who has become a successful journalist in London. The story reveals Chandler's dissatisfaction with his life and his inability to pursue his dreams. Counterparts, Farrington, a copier clerk, struggles with his alcoholism and his oppressive boss. The story explores the destructive consequences of his anger and his inability to cope with his frustrations. Clay, Maria, an elderly woman, visits her friends and former colleagues for a night of celebration. The story explores themes of loneliness, aging, and the loss of youth, as Maria's life is contrasted with those of her friends. A Painful Case, a middle-aged man, Mr. Duffy, reflects on his failed relationship with a married woman, Mrs. Sinico. The story explores the consequences of emotional isolation and the inability to form meaningful connections with others. Ivy Day in the Committee Room, a group of men gather to commemorate the death of Charles Stewart Parnell, a nationalist leader. The story highlights the political disillusionment and the decline of the Irish nationalist movement in the late 19th century. A mother, a domineering mother, Mrs. Carney, seeks to advance her daughter's career in music. The story reveals the consequences of her manipulation and the tension between the middle and working classes. Grace, Tom Kernan, a recovering alcoholic, attends a religious retreat in hopes of reconnecting with his family and faith. The story explores the themes of redemption and the power of religion in the lives of the characters. The Dead, the final story, brings together several characters from the previous stories at a New Year's Eve party. The protagonist, Gabriel Conroy, grapples with his feelings of disconnection and alienation from his family, friends, and the Irish culture. The story concludes with a powerful reflection on the nature of love, loss, and the search for meaning in life. Throughout the collection, Joyce masterfully explores the complexities of the human experience and the struggles faced by the residents of Dublin. The stories serve as a microcosm of the larger societal issues of the time, reflecting the themes of paralysis, entrapment, and the search for identity and self-realization. The themes of paralysis and entrapment are pervasive throughout James Joyce's Dubliners, serving as a commentary on the societal and personal constraints that prevent the characters from achieving their potential and realizing their dreams. These themes are manifested in various forms, such as financial difficulties, familial obligations, and the stifling nature of Irish society in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Paralysis in the collection is often depicted as a state of inaction or indecision, stemming from the characters' fear of change, their inability to escape their circumstances, or the societal pressures that keep them in a state of stagnation. For instance, in Eveline, the protagonist is unable to leave Dublin with her lover, Frank, due to her overwhelming sense of responsibility towards her family. This paralysis ultimately leads to her staying in a situation that brings her misery, as she is trapped by her own fears and obligations. Similarly, in A Little Cloud, the protagonist, Little Chandler, is trapped by his mundane life and the monotony of his job, while his friend Ignatius Gallagher seems to have found success and adventure in London. The contrast between their lives highlights Chandler's paralysis, as he is unable to break free from his dull existence and pursue his dreams, despite his longing for change. Entrapment, on the other hand, is portrayed as the inability to escape the circumstances that bind the characters, often resulting from the social and economic conditions of the time. The characters in Dubliners are ensnared by their environment, their families, and their own limitations. For example, in Counterparts, the protagonist, Farrington, is trapped by his alcoholism and his inability to cope with his frustrations, which ultimately leads to his downfall. In The Boarding House, the young man, Bob Duran, is trapped by societal expectations and the hypocrisy surrounding sexual relationships, as he is coerced into marrying a woman he does not love. The consequences of his entrapment reveal the societal pressures that dictate the characters' lives and limit their choices. Moreover, the themes of paralysis and entrapment are interconnected, as they both prevent the characters from realizing their true potential and finding fulfillment. The characters are often trapped in situations that lead to their paralysis, and their inability to break free from these circumstances reinforces their entrapment. Overall, Joyce's exploration of paralysis and entrapment in Dubliners sheds light on the complexities of the human experience and the societal issues that impact the lives of the characters. By delving into these themes, Joyce underscores the struggles faced by the residents of Dublin and the larger societal context that contributes to their stagnation and disillusionment. The characters in James Joyce's Dubliners are often unable to escape their circumstances, which contributes to an overwhelming sense of hopelessness throughout the collection. This inability to escape their surroundings and situations is a result of various factors, such as societal pressures, economic constraints, personal limitations, and familial obligations. One of the primary reasons for the characters' entrapment is the societal context in which they live. The rigid social hierarchy, moral judgments, and hypocrisy depicted in the stories often limit the characters' choices and opportunities. By highlighting the societal constraints that prevent the characters from improving their lives, Joyce emphasizes the pervasive sense of hopelessness that permeates the collection. For instance, in The Boarding House, the young man, Bob Duran, is trapped by societal expectations and the hypocrisy surrounding sexual relationships. Despite his reluctance to marry the boarding house owner's daughter, he is coerced into the arrangement due to the moral judgment of his peers and the pressure to conform to societal norms. This entrapment ultimately leads to a life of misery, as he is forced to marry a woman he does not love and live a life devoid of passion and fulfillment. Economic constraints also contribute to the characters' inability to escape their circumstances, as poverty and unemployment are recurring themes in the collection. The characters' financial struggles often limit their opportunities, reinforcing their sense of hopelessness. In Counterparts, the protagonist, Farrington, is trapped by his financial difficulties, which lead to his alcoholism and inability to cope with his frustrations. His financial struggles contribute to his downfall, ultimately reinforcing the sense of entrapment and despair that permeates the story. Personal limitations, such as fear, insecurity, and lack of ambition, also contribute to the characters' inability to escape their circumstances. In Eveline, the protagonist is unable to leave Dublin with her lover due to her overwhelming sense of responsibility towards her family. This fear and insecurity prevent her from pursuing a better life, leading to a life of unfulfilled dreams and regret. Familial obligations also play a significant role in the characters' entrapment, as they often feel duty-bound to their families, even at the expense of their own happiness. In The Dead, the protagonist, Gabriel Conroy, is trapped by his sense of obligation towards his family, which contributes to his feelings of disconnection and alienation. His inability to escape his familial duties reinforces the sense of hopelessness that permeates the story. The characters' inability to escape their circumstances contributes to a pervasive sense of hopelessness, as they are constantly confronted with the limitations and constraints that prevent them from finding happiness and fulfillment. By highlighting the societal, economic, and personal factors that contribute to the characters' entrapment, Joyce underscores the overwhelming sense of despair that permeates the collection. In conclusion, the characters' inability to escape their circumstances in James Joyce's Dubliners is a powerful commentary on the societal, economic, and personal constraints that contribute to the pervasive sense of hopelessness in the stories. By exploring the complexities of the human experience and the factors that prevent the characters from achieving their potential, Joyce underscores the struggles faced by the residents of Dublin and the larger societal context that contributes to their stagnation and disillusionment. The themes of entrapment and hopelessness in James Joyce's Dubliners are not unique to this collection but are also prevalent in other works of Irish literature. The pervasive sense of despair and the limitations imposed by societal and economic constraints are common themes in Irish literature, reflecting the struggles faced by the Irish people throughout history. One of the most notable examples of these themes in Irish literature is Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot. In this play, the characters Vladimir and Estragon are trapped in a state of limbo, waiting for the arrival of a figure named Godot, who never comes. The play explores the themes of entrapment and hopelessness, as the characters are unable to escape their circumstances or find meaning in their lives. Similarly, in Sean O'Casey's The Plough and the Stars, the characters are trapped by their circumstances and the societal constraints that limit their opportunities. The play is set during the Irish Easter Rising of 1916, and the characters' lives are disrupted by the violence and chaos of the rebellion. The play highlights the struggles faced by the Irish people, as they are caught in the crossfire of political and social upheaval. In Angela's Ashes, Frank McCourt's memoir of his childhood in Ireland, the themes of entrapment and hopelessness are also explored. The memoir details the struggles of the author's family, who are trapped in a cycle of poverty and despair. The author's father is unable to find work, and the family is forced to rely on charity and the support of their community. The memoir highlights the struggles faced by the Irish people, as they are forced to confront the limitations imposed by their circumstances. The themes of entrapment and hopelessness in Irish literature are often reflective of the historical and social context in which the works are set. The long history of oppression, poverty, and violence in Ireland has contributed to the pervasive sense of despair that is often depicted in the literature. The societal constraints and economic limitations that have been imposed on the Irish people have contributed to a sense of entrapment, as the characters are often unable to escape their circumstances. In conclusion, the themes of entrapment and hopelessness in James Joyce's Dubliners are prevalent in other works of Irish literature. The pervasive sense of despair and the limitations imposed by societal and economic constraints are common themes in Irish literature, reflecting the struggles faced by the Irish people throughout history. The themes of entrapment and hopelessness are often used to explore the complexities of the human experience and the societal and economic factors that contribute to the struggles faced by the Irish people.